Karen's perfect green lawn was now a swirling mess of neon pink, electric blue, and radioactive green. The sprinklers spat out rainbow-colored water in wild arcs, drenching her prized rose bushes and turning her white picket fence into a psychedelic mess. I stood behind my fence, biting my lip to keep from laughing. Karen's scream echoed down the street like a fire alarm. "What did you do to my lawn?" she shrieked, her face turning the same shade of purple as the water now staining her driveway. I didn't answer. I just smiled. Because this was payback. 2 weeks earlier, I had come home from work to find my garden hose limp and useless. No water. At first, I thought the city was doing repairs. But then I saw it, the shiny new lock on the shared water line between my house and Karen's. Karen had stolen my water. Again. This wasn't the first time. Last summer, she accidentally redirected my sprinklers to fill her kiddie pool. The time before that, she claimed my water was leaking into her yard. It wasn't, and shut off my access. But this time, she crossed a line. I marched over to her house, hose in hand, ready for a fight. She answered the door with a smug grin. "Oh, did you need something?" she asked, sipping her iced tea like a villain in a cartoon. "You locked the water line," I said, holding up the useless hose. "Again," she shrugged. "Well, someone has to be responsible. The city says we're in a drought. Can't have you wasting my water." Her water? Oh no. That's when I knew Karen wasn't just annoying. She was a full-blown water thief. And I was going to make sure she never stole from me again. That night, I sat in my garage, staring at the tangled mess of hoses and pipes under my workbench. Then it hit me. If Karen wanted to play dirty, fine. But she wasn't ready for what came next. I waited until midnight, when the neighborhood was asleep. Then, with a wrench in one hand and a mischievous grin on my face, I got to work. I didn't just fix the water line. I rewired it. By morning, Karen's sprinkler system was no longer connected to the city's clean, clear water. Oh no, it was hooked up to something much more colorful. The next morning, Karen stepped outside in her fluffy pink robe, ready to admire her perfect lawn. Instead, she got a Technicolor nightmare. The sprinklers kicked on right on schedule, but instead of crystal clear droplets, they sprayed thick, vibrant dye in every direction. Her grass? Tie-dye. Her sidewalk? Rainbow stripes. Her precious rose bushes looked like they'd been dunked in a paint factory. And the best part? The dye wasn't permanent, but it was stubborn. It would take weeks to fade. Karen's scream was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. But as she spun around, her eyes locking onto me with pure fury, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't over. Not even close. Because Karen, she never lost. And she was coming for me. Karen's face twisted into a snarl as she stomped across her ruined lawn, her slippers squelching in neon puddles. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You," she hissed. "You did this." I leaned against my fence, arms crossed, trying to look innocent. "Did what?" Her eyes burned with rage. "You know what? My lawn is destroyed. I'm calling the police." I shrugged. "Go ahead. But you might want to explain why you illegally locked the shared water line first." Her mouth snapped shut. For a second, I thought I had her. Then her lips curled into a smile. A scary smile. "Oh, you're going to regret this," she whispered. And with that, she turned and marched back inside, slamming the door so hard her tacky garden gnomes toppled over. I should have felt victorious, but instead, a cold knot formed in my stomach. Karen never backed down. And now, she was declaring war. For the next 3 days, nothing happened. No cops showed up. No angry letters. No Karen screaming at me from her porch. It was weird. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Every time I left the house, I half expected to find my car keyed or my trash cans tipped over. But nothing. My neighbor, old Mr. Henderson, noticed me peeking through my blinds for the 5th time that morning. "You look jumpy, kid," he said, sipping his coffee on his porch. "What'd you do?" I sighed. "Karen." He nodded like that explained everything. "Ah, well, watch your back. That woman's got a mean streak wider than her driveway." I didn't need the warning. I knew Karen was plotting something. And then, on the 4th day, I found out what it was. I woke up to the sound of drilling. Bzz-dat, bzz-dat. Groggy and confused, I stumbled to my window and froze. Karen was outside, and she wasn't alone. 2 workers in bright orange vests were digging up the strip of land between our houses, right where the water line ran. Karen stood over them, arms crossed, smirking like she'd just won the lottery. My heart dropped. No, 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 no. I threw on a hoodie and bolted outside. "Hey, what are you doing?" Karen turned, her grin widening. "Oh, good morning. Just making some improvements." One of the workers wiped his brow. "New water line installation, ma'am. Private hookup." My stomach twisted. A private hookup? That meant, "Yep," Karen chirped. "No more shared lines. No more problems. And best of all," she leaned in, her voice dripping with venom. "No more water for you." I stared at the hole in the ground where the old pipe had been. They were cutting me off. "You can't do that," I snapped. "That's illegal." Karen waved a piece of paper in my face. "Not when you get a permit." I snatched it from her. It looked official city stamps, signatures, the whole deal. But something was off. The dates were wrong. The permit was backdated, approved, before I'd even dyed her lawn. Which meant Karen had planned this all along. She'd wanted me to retaliate, so she could destroy me. I stood there, gripping the permit, my mind racing. Karen wasn't just petty. She was smart, and she'd played me. The workers finished disconnecting the old line. One of them tossed me a pitying look. "Sorry, miss. You'll have to call the city to get your own hookup now." Karen smirked. "Oh, but that takes weeks, and it's so expensive," she fake pouted. "Guess you'll have to shower at the gym." I clenched my fists. This wasn't just about water anymore. This was about winning. And Karen thought she already had. But she forgot one thing. I wasn't the kind of person who gave up. And I had one last trick up my sleeve. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop. The city's permit database was public. And after some digging, I found it, the real permit history. Karen's paperwork was fake. Well, half fake. The permit number was real, but it was for a different property across town. She'd copied it, changed the address, and printed a convincing fake, which meant her whole legal water line. Totally illegal. I grinned. Karen thought she was untouchable, but I was about to prove her very wrong. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to the city's building inspector. The second, to the local news. Because if Karen wanted to play dirty, I'd make sure everyone saw it. By noon, a city inspector's truck rolled up to Karen's house. Right behind it, a news van. Karen burst out of her front door, her face pale. "What is this?" The inspector held up his clipboard. "We received a complaint about an illegal water line installation. We need to inspect the work." Karen's eyes darted to me. I waved from my porch, sipping my coffee like I didn't have a care in the world. Her face turned red. "This is harassment. I have a permit." The inspector frowned. "Ma'am, this permit number belongs to a house on Maple Street. Not here." The news camera turned toward her. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. Then, "You little snitch!" she screamed, lunging toward me. The inspector grabbed her arm. "Ma'am, calm down." But Karen wasn't listening. She ripped free, her eyes wild. And then she did the unthinkable. She grabbed the nearest thing she could find, a garden hose, and charged at me. Karen swung the garden hose like a battle axe, her face twisted in pure fury. Water sprayed in wild arcs as she charged, drenching the sidewalk, the mailbox, and unfortunately me. I barely had time to duck before the hose whipped past my head with a thwack. "You ruined my life," she shrieked. The news camera zoomed in. The inspector yelled for her to stop. Mr. Henderson, watching from his porch, nearly choked on his coffee. And me? I ran. Karen wasn't fast, but she was determined. She chased me across my lawn, the hose still gushing water, her slippers slapping against the pavement. "Get back here, you little weasel." I vaulted over my fence, but she just went around, still swinging. I zigzagged between trees. She followed, panting, her pink bathrobe flapping behind her like a deranged superhero cape. Then disaster. My foot caught on a sprinkler head. I went down, hard, face first, into the grass. Karen loomed over me, hose raised like a sword. "Gotcha! Now!" Sploosh! A bucket of icy water drenched her from behind. Karen gasped, frozen in shock. I looked past her. Mr. Henderson stood there, holding an empty bucket. Oops. The police showed up. Karen, now soaking wet and fuming, tried to explain that I was the criminal. The inspector held up her fake permit. The news camera kept rolling. And the officer? He sighed like this was the dumbest call of his career. "Ma'am," he said, "you can't attack people with a hose." "She started it." Karen jabbed a finger at me. I held up my hands. "All I did was report illegal construction." The officer pinched the bridge of his nose. "Right. Here's what's going to happen. 1. Karen's new water line shut down. The city ripped it out the next day. 2. Fake permit? A fine. A big one. 3. Assault with a hose. A warning." But the video was already going viral. Karen was livid. But she wasn't done. Oh no. Because as the cop car pulled away, she locked eyes with me and mouthed 2 words. Game on. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No birds, no cars, just nothing. I frowned and went to check my phone. No service. My Wi-Fi? Dead. I rushed outside and nearly tripped over a cut cable in my yard. My stomach dropped. Karen hadn't just stolen my water now. She'd stolen my internet. I followed the cablorite to Karen's shed. Inside? A mess of wires, a pair of wire cutters, and a handwritten note. Who's laughing now? I clenched my fists. This wasn't just revenge. This was war. And I was about to fight back hard. That night, I waited until Karen's lights went off. Then, with a flashlight in my teeth and a plan in my head, I crept toward her house. Not for sabotage, not for revenge, but for leverage. Because I'd found something interesting in the city records. Something Karen really didn't want anyone to know. And by morning, everyone would. The city records office had a dusty, forgotten feel to it, like the kind of place where secrets went to die. I'd spent hours digging through property files, permit histories, and zoning documents until I found it. The smoking gun. Karen's house wasn't just built on a normal lot. It was built on a wetland. And not just any wetlanda protected one. The kind with fines for illegal drainage. The kind that could get her entire property condemned. I grinned. Karen had messed with the wrong neighbor. According to the documents, Karen's backyard wasn't supposed to be dry. Decades ago, the whole area had been marshland. But the original owner, Karen's grandfather, had illegally drained it, filled it in, and built over it. And Karen? She knew. Buried in her property files was a notice from the city, warning her that if the wetland was ever disturbed again, she'd face massive penalties. Which meant every time she watered her lawn, every time she dug up her yard, every time she messed with the water lines, she was breaking the law. Again. I tucked the papers into my bag, heart pounding. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was justice. I didn't go straight to the city. No. First, I wanted Karen to sweat. So I printed out the documents, and I slipped them into her mailbox with a sticky note on top. Fix my internet. By tomorrow, I fix your house. Then I waited. It didn't take long. 2 hours later, my doorbell rang. Karen stood there, face pale, clutching the papers in her shaking hands. "Where did you get these?" she whispered. I crossed my arms. "Public records." Her eye twitched. "This is blackmail," I shrugged. And cutting my internet was... what, exactly? She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time ever, Karen was speechless. Finally, she gritted her teeth. "Fine, your internet will be back on tonight." I smiled. "And the water line?" Her nostrils flared. "Fine." She turned to leave, then stopped. "But this isn't over." I leaned against the doorframe. Oh, I know. Because I had one more move. And it was brilliant. The next morning, 2 things happened. 1. My internet and water were magically restored. 2. A very official-looking envelope arrived for Karen. I watched from my window as she tore it open and her face went white. It was a notice from the Environmental Protection Agency, a surprise inspection of her property. Today, Karen's head snapped up, her eyes locking onto mine. I gave her a little wave. She looked like she wanted to murder me. The EPA agents arrived in a sleek, black SUV. They marched into Karen's backyard with clipboards, soil testers, and grim expressions. Karen fluttered around them like a panicked moth. "There's no wetland here. This is all a misunderstanding." The lead agent, a no-nonsense woman in a sharp suit, didn't even look up. "Ma'am, our satellite imaging shows significant water displacement. We'll need to test the soil." Karen's voice climbed an octave. "Satellite imaging!" I sipped my coffee, grinning. Because that was a bluff. But Karen didn't know that. Then, disaster. One of the agents knelt near Karen's prized rose bushes and frowned. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "why is the soil this saturated?" Karen froze. "Too watered them?" The agent dug a little deeper. "This isn't irrigation. This is groundwater." My stomach dropped. Oh no, because I'd lied about the satellite imaging. But it turned out the wetland was real, and Karen's yard was literally sinking. The agents kept digging. Literally. Within an hour, they'd found standing water 2 feet under Karen's lawn. Her entire backyard was built on a hidden marsh. The lead agent turned to Karen, her voice icy. "Ma'am, you are in serious violation of federal environmental laws." Karen's knees buckled. But I didn't know." The agent wasn't buying it. "The records show you were notified." Karen's eyes darted to me, begging for help. I just smiled. Because this was better than revenge. This was karma. By noon, Karen's yard was condemned. Bright yellow caution tape wrapped around her property. A notice slapped on her front door. "No disturbance of land. Penalties up to 50. 0. And Karen? She sat on her porch steps, staring blankly at her ruined lawn. For the first time ever, she looked broken. I should have felt triumphant. But as I watched Karen slump inside, something twisted in my gut. This had gone too far. I didn't just want to destroy her. I wanted her to stop. And now I had to fix it. That night, I knocked on Karen's door. She opened it, red-eyed and exhausted. "What do you want?" I took a deep breath, and I handed her a folder. Inside, a solution. Karen stared at the folder in my hands like it might explode. Her eyes flicked from the papers to my face, suspicion and exhaustion warring in her gaze. "What is this?" she asked, voice hoarse. I took a deep breath. A way out. Inside the folder was a proposal loan I'd spent all afternoon researching. Instead of fighting the EPA, Karen could work with them. By restoring part of her yard as a protected wetland, she could avoid the worst fines. There were even government grants to help cover the costs. But there was a catch. She'd have to give up her perfect lawn. Forever. Karen's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. "You expect me to just let my yard die?" I shook my head. "Not die. Change." I pointed to the designs I'd sketched: native plants, a small pond, a natural habitat that would keep the EPA happy and look beautiful. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. Then, to my shock, she laughed. A bitter, broken sound. "All this," she said, "because I wanted a green lawn." We sat on her porch steps as the sunset painted the sky orange. And for the first time, Karen talked. Not yelled, not screamed. Talked. Her grandfather had built this house. Winning Yard of the Month had been his pride. When he passed, she'd promised to keep it perfect. But the lawn was a lie. The water lines were a mess. The soil was unstable. And every year it got harder to maintain. I knew it was sinking, she admitted quietly. I just didn't want to admit it. I nodded. And my water? She had the decency to look ashamed. I needed it. The old pipes under my yard were leaking. I was trying to fix it. Without telling anyone. Without asking for help. Just like everything else in Karen's life. I extended my hand. New deal, I said. We tell the EPA you're committing to the wetland project. I'll help you rebuild. And in return, Karen eyed me. What? You. Stop stealing my water. A beat of silence. Then she snorted and shook my hand. The next few weeks were weird. Karen and I became an unlikely team. We met with the EPA. We pulled permits. We tore up her dying grass and replaced it with wildflowers, ferns, and a winding little creek that belonged there. Her yard wasn't a manicured trophy anymore. It was alive. And honestly, it was gorgeous. Then the reporters came back. Not to shame Karen, to celebrate her. Local woman restores protected wetland, the headlines read. Karen, the environmental hero. The neighborhood association, who'd once given her Yard of the Month, now gave her an award. And Karen? She cried. On the last day of the project, we sat by her new pond, watching dragonflies skim the water. I owe you an apology, Karen said suddenly. I raised an eyebrow. Just one? She elbowed me, but she was smiling. Shut up. A pause. Then, thank you, she muttered. I grinned. For what? For not letting me get away with being the worst. I laughed. Anytime, Karen. And for the first time ever, it didn't sound like an insult. A year later, our street looks nothing like it did before. Karen's yard is now a mini nature preserve. My water pressure is fantastic. And the tie-dye incident? We don't talk about it. Okay, sometimes we do. And we laugh. As for the neighbors, they're terrified of us now. Because they've all seen what happens when Karen and I team up. And let's just say, nobody dares to mess with the water lines anymore. 6 months after the wetland project, the city announced new water conservation rules, including strict limits on lawn watering. All the neighbors panicked, except Karen and me, because our yards? Already perfect. Karen grinned at me over the fence. Told you we'd win. I clinked my lemonade glass against hers. And together, we watched the sunset over the pond. No sprinklers required.